Hello, everybody. Welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Jose,
I'm Mike.
and we've just come back from seeing Steve McQueen's new film, Widows.
Yeah, written by Gillian Flynn,
Yes.
based on a 1983 TV series on ITV.
Yes, which is kind of like a landmark British television series by...
Lynda La Plante. She wrote it apparently because she was just sick and tired of the roles she was getting offered. And she wrote this thing which was, the premise was, this heist goes wrong, and the widows of the men who failed the heist, died during the heist, take it on themselves, do the heist themselves. And that's the premise of this. She's probably more famous for having written Prime Suspect with Helen Mirren in about 1990, 1991. Maybe
well, I don't know, because it continued for so many years, right?
But initially.
Yeah. I think it must have been before 92, because I think I came into it in the second or third series. Definitely second.
Prime Suspect came out first, 1991.
Okay.
So, this adaptation is written by Gillian Flynn, who is best known for Gone Girl, I'd say, and directed by Steve McQueen. He won the Turner Prize, right? When he was,
I think he did.
When he was doing fine art.
And he did
12 Years a Slave.
12 Years a Slave.
Hunger and Shame.
And Shame, that's right.
And it's got an all-star cast, amazing cast.
An amazing
in
cast.
Widows. And it's building a tapestry of life in America, or a certain kind of life in America, and a kind of survival in Chicago.
Yes, it's very beautifully done.
You get this really rich sense of place. It made me think of what you were saying, particularly about Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri.
Yes.
About the complete lack of identification with place, the lack of care about making it feel like a real place. The film has been made by someone who comes from outside America. This, also made by someone who comes from outside America, Steve McQueen is British, doesn't suffer from that at all. I mean, maybe someone from Chicago might find their problems with it, but it just feels so richly observed.
It's a film about America as much as it is about anything else. I mean, you have people buying guns, you have the churches, you have the sleazy politicians, you have, the black beauty salons as kind of small-owned businesses. You have the council estates, or the projects, as they call them there. You have, a young kid being killed just, basically for being black and, not putting his hands up as quickly as the police wanted. So it does kind of, under the guise of this heist film, it is a kind of a portrait of America, really, and about gender relations in America. And I think it's also a film that's kind of woven through with grief, really, and it's as much a grief for the character situation as a kind of a grief for the country and the culture, really. One thing is indistinguishable for the other. I mean, we were introduced to these characters as they become widows. So, their situation, their interpersonal situation is kind of almost indistinguishable from, their financial, social situation, really. It all kind of, becomes one. And I think it's really an amazing film.
I didn't think it was amazing. I think I didn't get on with it, but I kind of respect those elements about it.
For me, it's like, one of the greatest things I've seen this year. I mean, there are some things, that I was just kind of seeing, and I was just bowled over. I mean, that bit where, is it Elizabeth Debicki?
Elizabeth Debicki.
Debicki, where her mother's basically pushing her into becoming a whore, and, she goes to try it out, and she's talking to this man, and all of a sudden you're almost like kind of seeing her through gauze, and it's like kind of the image begins to crumble, but it's kind of, it looks both pretty, but already she's becoming displaced, right? And it's almost, that whole conversation takes place, within that image. I just thought that was so beautiful and expressive. There's another equivalent moment where the Michelle Rodriguez character has gone to find out about where the safe is, and she's trying to con the architect's husband, and he gets angry at her because she doesn't know that she's just died 4 months ago, and the scene of tears becomes one of sex and desire and hunger and loss, and I just think it's like so incredible. And then when she escapes that, you see her shot through all of these passing metro cars, and again it's like this thing of not seeing her fully, of seeing her torn apart, of being shattered to bits. That the visual effect is just so beautifully expressive and so apropos, so appropriate. I just think the film is full of things like that. I just find it like beautiful.
I didn't. A lot of elements that you described sounded like they felt like lip service to me, like contributing to this sort of tapestry of what life is like for a certain kind of person in a certain place in the world. But it kind of felt like lip service, like you say, the corrupt politicians, or the kind of the games with money and power. Trying to get the church on side, and
the casual violence.
It felt like things were just being. They felt like references to me rather than generating a kind of richness. What felt the richest to me was the women, and more, and specifically the kind of the construction of gender and the way that the women interacted, and the kind of relationship they had with their memories of their husbands, their kind of grief around them. Particularly Elizabeth Debicki's character, who she's introduced. The only thing you see between her and her husband before the husband dies is she's got a bruise on her eye. She's got a black eye, and he says to her, "You need to put some makeup on that or something because it makes me feel bad."
Yeah.
And she says, "It makes me feel bad too."
That's the John Berthal character,
right?
Yeah, whom I love.
And that's it. So immediately this kind of complicated relationship starts where she's being abused to some degree, but then she also loves him. And that's made clear. It's made clearer later on that she loves this man, and then she kind of gets sort of thrust into a different sort of dodgy, semi-abusive relationship with this guy who they're kind of developing feelings for each other, but he is paying her.
I didn't quite read it that same way. I mean, basically, there's this guy who wants to buy her, so he's not abusing her. I mean, he's just buying her, really, which is not the same thing. And she's kind of very active in those choices, and then she is developing feelings for him, and he's not. So I think one of the things that I find most amazing about the film is how all of these things are always complicated. So, the Elizabeth Debicki, the John Berthal character, he does hit her, and you can tell that she doesn't like it. But on the other hand, you can tell that she really loves him, and that in some ways, that kind of very same violence that results in him hitting her is something that she finds a sexual turn on. You get all of that kind of, in their scenes together. Likewise, Michelle Rodriguez's husband, you get a whole bundle of feelings that are kind of intermingled. So again, she loves him, but basically he's stealing her money, and he's gambling it away, and the mother blames her for the kind of life that actually the husband is dragging her into. I mean, I think it's quite amazing, for a heist film that I found gripping, to kind of convey these really kind of layered relationships, and sometimes conflicting ones. So I found it incredibly rich, and I think visually it's like a marvel, really.
Really?
Yes, I do. I mean, some of the compositions, one of the things that began, and you see the left-hand side of the frame, there's somebody standing in the neighborhood, you know, and then kind of, and it's foregrounded, and everything else seems kind of like really shallow, and that already gives you a sense of the place, you know, where these people are from. I thought it was amazing. There were a couple of shots that began, you know, at a rally for the church, and then, you know, kind of, that's with Colin.
Firth. Colin Farrell.
Colin Farrell character, where, you know, and then kind of you realize that the camera's actually on the car, right? And yet you're not really seeing into the car. What you're seeing is kind of, you know, the landscape moving, right? I thought that was all like amazing.
It feels like a stunt to me, that sort of stuff.
I don't-
There's an elegance to it. Particularly, I mean, Steve McQueen was notable for his long take in Hunger, which was this famous 20, maybe 25 minute long take where the camera just sat there and watched the conversation between Bobby Sands and the priest. And then in Shame, he had this long take where it was Michael Fassbender jogging, and it was just went on and on and on. Really felt like a stunt. And in this, that kind of stuff is toned back to a degree, and actually when it's used, I think it's very elegantly used. That shot with the car, though, that you mentioned, I didn't.
Well, for me it did, and actually, particularly so since it's swiveled. So, you know, you begin kind of by looking on one side and you go and look by the other. So, I mean, I think it's a stunt. You know, you could say that these things are stunt if they're not expressive. But actually, all of these shots that I was describing, you know, the shot with like Elizabeth Debicki out of focus and just kind of made up of lights, that's her life. That's what her life is becoming at that point. And I thought it was like very beautiful and very expressive. You know,
There was an element to that to that car shot where, you know, I mean, it's about him going from where he's been campaigning to his house. Basically, his house is his kind of base of operations, and the idea is that this character that Colin Farrell plays is, you know, he's mentioned as a kind of JFK figure at one point by his dad. So he's kind of hoping to continue a kind of minor political dynasty, and he's well off, extremely so. And yet trying to represent a ward which is not very well off, heavily populated by black people, which he is not, and you know, and that's the discussion that Brian Tyree Henry, who is his opponent, has with him, saying, "I'm from here and you're not. You live in a house that's one block in just to say you can live, just so you can say you live here." So that shot is about, you know, because he goes a few roads. It's like a minute and a half, 2 minutes sort of conversation that you have in the car, where you're watching the scenery change.
Yes.
So I get it. Nonetheless, it felt like I was noticing. You know what I mean?
I wanted to notice. I mean, you know, you can tell that it's really made by a visual artist. I think every shot is kind of, you know, very expressive, very beautiful, very original as well. And at the same time, it allows all the actors to breathe. I mean, the performances are fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, like Viola Davis is like, you know, it's like she's walking around with a cloud of hurt and sadness, you know, and grief. I mean, it's just, she's completely great, you know, and all the other women are as well. I was very moved by the whole film, actually. I found it like kind of, you know, really just beautiful. And actually it's beautiful because it's complex and because it resonates. You know, the whole film is overladen with grief and loss, right? I mean, first it begins with Viola Davis kind of mourning her husband, who you really get the feeling, you know, has been her whole life, really. You know, so, and then kind of you get all the flashbacks into the son and how the son might have affected their relationship. And then kind of spoilers, you know, you realize that kind of Liam Neeson had found another woman, had another baby, right? And, you know, and then at the end, even when she discovers all of these things, she's still stroking him. You get a sense of, like, you know, she did something that she had to do, but it was loss and sadness, you know, and I just think that is so beautiful.
Yeah.
So I kind of, and I love the way that they're photographed. Like, you know, there are some extreme close-ups where you see every line in Liam Neeson's face. You know, it almost becomes like an abstract expressionist painting. There are so many lines and furrows and so on. you know, and then in some angles you also see, you know, how sexy he is, and you know, and also how sexy she finds him, and yeah, so it's almost like the kind of, you know, those two things kind of coexist, you know, and in a way that's, I think, very, very original and very beautiful. In particular, it's particularly original and beautiful because it is encased in a heist film, and the heist film also has, for me, the pleasures of the heist film. You know, of kind of them coming together, of them figuring out, of them doing the training, of them casing the joint. You know, but it's done in a completely different and original way, which is, you know, not just these women and, you know, these, well, a mixed race group of women, right? But also each kind of, you know, with a character really that kind of feels both stereotypical but also fleshed out. You know, it's kind of, you know, the type, but actually unusually this type is also given depth.
Yeah.
You know, like the Elizabeth Debicki character, right? She's just basically the dumb blonde in any film, really. You know, dumb blonde hooker. But she's not. She loved this, you know, this guy who turns her on but beats her. Her mother, you know, you can tell she loves her mother, but her mother is almost like wanting to whore her out. You know, blah blah. Yeah, like kind of, you know, she turns out to be smart, you know, and kind of, she's the one who gets shot. I mean, you know, kind of a stereotype is given all of these kind of different kind of.
It's probably a measure
arcs.
of how I failed to click with the film that my favourite character was Daniel Kaluuya, who played the enforcer, sort of to Brian Tyree Henry's challenger. I mean, one of the kind of more interesting things about the film, I think, is that there is such a level of violence in the politics that that this challenger to the politics is basically like a gang boss. You know, he has an enforcer who murders people.
That's right.
And clearly it's about kind of coming from a very violent place. As in literally a violent place in America, and a violent kind of situation and upbringing. Because I think he talks at one point about this job and the money that he needed for his campaign and so on being the kind of ticket out of it, the way to improve his life and have a life like Colin Farrell's. So that's kind of certainly where it comes from. But nonetheless, it's kind of shocking to see that put into a political context in a way. But the thing about Daniel Kaluuya, his character really has no depth. I mean, he is the most just down the line genre character of any of them.
Yeah, he's a killer.
He's a killer, and he gets these great scenes. I mean, those long takes we were talking about. He gets pretty much. There's a couple of scenes where he is doing his enforcing. He's doing his intimidation and murdering of people for various reasons, and he gets these long takes to do them in. So the first one where it's established how awful he is the guys that let their money get stolen. They were rapping at the time, and he says, "I want to see it," and he makes them perform the rap, and he lets it go on and on and on, and he's staring them in the eyes. This kind of awful, kind of bloodthirsty stare that he's got right in his face, and then shoots them. And again, it's quick and brutal and loud. So he gets these long takes to show that off. You know, it wouldn't be the same if it was being cut up. I mean, it could be just as effective in a different way, but he gets these long unbroken bits of performance to show off in, as do the other actors who are in those scenes, obviously. But yeah, I mean, it's probably a measure of the fact that I was not on the film's wavelength, that those were my favourite bits.
Yes,
because they are the bits with least subtlety.
They're the most Boise bits.
Yeah, they are. I mean, it's absolutely right. I was thinking about that. I was thinking, like, is this like a heist movie for girls in a way? I mean, that's a kind of silly way of putting it, but heist movies are, generally speaking, for boys. They are boys' movies. They're about guns and car chases and bank robberies and.
Well, Ocean's 13 or whatever it is, or
Ocean's
14
8.
now, or 8.
Yeah.
Yes,
Was
the newest one.
Yeah. Is obviously a kind of counterexample, but then what they're doing in Ocean's 8 is they're saying let's do this sort of glitzy gala,
Yes.
And let's and it's obviously kind of comic and light, and it's
This is like a million miles better than Ocean's 8.
but it's also a million miles away.
Yes.
Like, in terms of kind of how it's
it's
aiming
both better and different. It's an art movie. This movie. I think it's a great movie. Whereas kind of.
But let's think about it. So that question of how is it aimed at women then? As it's not aimed at women. We're saying in the same way that Ocean's 8 is.
No, because I think I think this film takes on a woman's perspective, or makes the women's role central. But actually, I think the film is dealing with much more complex things. I think Ocean's 8 was like candy floss, basically. Whereas I think this is a very complex film. It's telling us something about America. It's making an equivalence, between like this rich fourth generation politician and a gangster. They're both the same, right? In the film, they each have their enforcers, right? Like so. It's kind of representing these very complex women who are at the foreground of the film. I mean, it's a film in which the husbands are the husbands, right? It's the women who are the protagonists and who run the film, right? So, and it's kind of, asking, I think, questions of, it seems silly to say, but like, what is life, right? Like, what has a whole lifelong relationship amounted to for Viola Davis, right? She's got a dead son, she's got a dead husband, she's left with no money, she's just left with like grief, right? And then even her grief is stolen from her, right? And yet at the same time, she can't wash away, the love that she felt for, this person, right? So kind of, I mean, those are, I think, very complex things to deal with. How do you relate to a mother who basically, who's made you live on your own, because she's made a living off of men, and you've run off to kind of, have your own life, and then, like, she's still trying to pimp you out, like, 10 years later, but you love her, right? Which is kind of, I mean, those are kind of complex things to convey. And I think the film, does it kind of incredibly beautifully. And it is about kind of, what's like for people in this America, really, kind of, what happens if you've got to, have two jobs and go babysit somebody else's children, right? So that you can get by. I mean, I think that's great,
Yeah. I did think it was interesting that there is another kind of subtle twist on the heist movie, which is that the heist movies typically are about the big score, and we all get to walk away from this with millions of dollars, and it's a huge payoff, and there's a success at the end. And the heist in this is about doing what these women have to do to survive.
That's right.
As you said, Viola Davis has been left with absolutely nothing.
Well,
the others, the shop's been taken away from Michelle Rodriguez. She ran the shop, and then it gets repossessed because all of her money was being thrown down the drain at casinos. Elizabeth Debicki doesn't have anything, and her mother's trying to pimp her out.
Yes.
So they are. So there's this promise of $1 million each at the end of this. And it's not about that. There's no kind of celebratory like, oh my god, $1 million. It's just about that's a way out.
That's right. It's that's what you need to build a new life for yourself, to make a new life, right? To escape kind of a life that's become unbearable through no fault of your own, right? Because at the end you see the hairdresser. Off with her children in a car off somewhere, right? So I just thought it was beautiful. I want to see it again, and I think kind of the use of imagery is just fantastic, right? It's just beautiful, and again, kind of beautiful because it's just so expressive. I mean, these kind of things, these images that kind of linger in your mind. I mean. Again, those extreme close-ups of Viola Davis's face, which for a while you're thinking, what am I seeing? you know, and then you realize that you're just watching like this 30-foot close-up of an eye, right, with kind of all the texture of the skin, you know, and kind of, yeah, and you know, because a lot of the scenes with Viola Davis, it takes place in dreamland, in a half dream state, where, you know, she's overwhelmed with grief, and she's thinking about her past, and, you know, she's kind of, you get the sense that she's missing her husband to the extent that, you know, she smells him. And in fact, actually, the smell is key in how she finds,
Yeah, the dog.
yeah, that, you know, and then you see her spraying on his cologne, right, and making sense of, yeah, of it all. So, but this, you get a physical sense of need and want and missing somebody in those scenes where she's in bed thinking of, you know, how much she loved her husband.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's incredibly beautiful.
I particularly liked the kind of first moment you see her missing her husband is when she stands in front. She puts on a song, and she stands in front of the window, and it's at night, so you see a reflection back at her, and then Liam Neeson in the reflection, you know, kind of puts his arms around her, and he's there, and then of course he cut back to real life, and she's just standing there.
Yes.
Which, you know, which is not hugely original, but I thought was really effective. Yeah, I thought that was very beautiful.
I thought the whole score
And took its time as well. I mean, it was very sensitively done, and you get a chance to, like, she's kind of, you know, sinking into her grief, and you get a chance to do that with her. You know, which I liked.
I thought the score was beautiful as well. You know, bringing in like Nina Simone and Van Morrison, and like, you know, and actually again, it's used as a shortcut to particular types of emotion. You know, and at the end, when when the credits came on, and I thought, oh my God, who's singing that? I know who it is, and then it occurred to me it's Sade, right?
Okay.
You know, and again with kind of, you know, that resonance. I want to mention a little bit about the scene where, you know, the Kevin J. O'Connor character gets stabbed, because for me, Kevin J. O'Connor is, you know, somebody whom I just love from 80s cinema. And part of the reason why I love him is he's got this really squeaky voice, squeaky and gentle and sensitive, you know. And so actually it was like kind of particularly resonant or painful, you know, when he was being stabbed, you know, he gets thrown out of his wheelchair and kind of, you know, gets stabbed and stabbed and stabbed and stabbed, and, you know, and what's his name? The one you
Daniel
like.
Kaluuya.
Daniel Kaluuya is almost like, you know, wanting to hurt him, but he's paralyzed from so he's trying to find out where it's actually going to hurt him.
Into a game.
Right. Yeah. And so it turns into kind of, you know, it's brutally violent, right? And you feel it. And on the other hand, it's also mildly funny, right? And kind of, you know, part of those two things going together has to do with that voice being Kevin J. O'Connor's, right? And which also kind of evokes, to me anyway, a whole type of like 80s indie cinema as well, you know. So kind of, and the film is full of little bits by great actors. I mean, you know, Robert Duvall, obviously, but I also thought, you know, the casting of people like Kevin J. O'Connor and who played the Brian Tyree Henry, who is my favorite actor of the moment, actually, you know, from Atlanta, but you've been seeing him in all kinds of things, right? And here he reappears again, kind of, you know, fleshing out like a character, like, you know, he's just great because, you know, he's often so serious and quiet, and he dominates kind of a scene by saying nothing, you know, by just waiting his response. So I thought it was fantastic, and, you know, it's but sometimes personal responses can be changed by context for viewing. I mean, you know, because really I didn't expect anything of it, you know, because
I did, you see.
Well, I didn't expect anything of it. You know, it has kind of an all-star cast, but really not a top-rung all-star cast. And obviously, you know,
it has those two very big names at the top, Steve McQueen and Gillian Flynn. I kind of expected things out of those, and it does have a, you know, okay, they're not Tom Cruise, but they are a really good cast, and
It's
a
very
very
great
a very
cast.
impressive cast.
It's a great cast, but
And the trailer as well kind of
it's not a cast of huge box office stars.
No.
Yeah. So so you know, I kind of, and actually, to be honest, I'm not the biggest admirer of Steve McQueen as a filmmaker, right? Like, you know, I mean, 12 Years a Slave, it was almost like a kind of, I mean, you know, I remember seeing it with you, and I felt it very deeply, but it almost felt kind of wrong, you know, to be watching that brutality and be made to admire like a sunset or whatever it was, right? Like it was almost like too beautiful, too pretty, you know, the way that kind of your eye was drawn. So
that was what I thought. That was one of the things I thought was great about that film. I do think 12 Years a Slave is a masterpiece, despite the fact we both share that reservation about Brad Pitt saving the day at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
But the stuff about that shot particularly where he's being hanged, and
I mean, it's amazing.
and you see this kind of pastoral scene around, and it's about staring the kind of national shame of particularly America, but also generally Western civilization in the face.
All I'm saying is that I've never really truly loved any of his films until this one.
That's fair enough.
You know, so
hard to love. I mean, that's probably true. They're difficult to love.
yes, you know. So I think for this time, my admiration kind of meets my love. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
Right? And I think it's kind of it both has a kind of a pace, you know, and it has kind of like a payoff, and it allows actors to breathe in a way that, you know, I didn't think he did before. So like, you know, kind of Shame with what's his name,
Michael
Fassbender, you know, kind of walking around and so on. And Fassbender is fantastic, but it's almost like the role is to me too monotone, right? Kind of. Whereas in this one, kind of, you know, you get all kinds of, let's say, colors and tonalities through the different characters that all of these different actors play in an ensemble that I think is really well conducted in terms of like tone. It has a kind of like a rhythm, really, you know. So if Viola Davis had been the whole film, it would have been unbearable, right? Because there is like this cloud of grief over her, really, you know. But actually her grief is different than the Beaky's grief, than Rodriguez's grief, you know. And so I really loved it.
Yeah. No, fair enough. That's great. Well, good.
Yes. So it's kind of, I think it's a film to see again. I highly recommend it. It might be good to warn people that, you know, don't go in with the expectations of having like a genre, you know,
certainly
piece, right? Because I do think it's an art movie, right? So it's an art movie that kind of uses the genre to comment on people in place. I mean, you know, this particular America of the moment, which is like, you know, car cemeteries and car auctions and, you know, gun marketplaces and churches and, you know, kind of, gerrymandering and, you know, and so on. So, you know, that's kind of the landscape that these people's grief kind of stems from, basically. You know.
My expectations were probably impossibly high, but I mean they weren't. I don't think they were entirely unjustified by the you know, kind of advertising and that sort of thing. Like, I mean, like I say, the list of names in the cast and the names of the creative team and the trailer as well, which was, I mean, did exactly what a trailer should do, which is get you unbelievably excited. To me, probably set expectations that you couldn't match no matter what. Which, that's one of them things. These things happen.
All right.
It's my fault.
Maybe we should leave it here. I loved it, and I highly recommend it. And actually, I think it's a film to go back to and kind of explore again. It's a film that I want to, you know, pay more attention to, kind of the visuals, actually, because I did think this was extraordinary. And of course, what happens is that you get involved in the plot and, what's going to happen next. And sometimes and kind of your eye doesn't operate in the same way. And I kind of, I'd really like to see it again and fixate on those elements some more.
So the other film it made me think of quite vividly was You Were Never Really Here. The Lynn Ramsey film, which again is a genre film. That's a revenge film, really, but it's a genre film that is taking kind of huge artistic leaps to express something greater than the genre typically does.
I think that's a very good comparison.
And particularly visually. Yes. I mean, you're talking about the visuals in this, which I probably do need to see again to really appreciate. Whereas You Were Never Really Here, from the first second, I had the sense that this was visually very special.
That was very beautiful. And actually, I think both films are cinematic.
Oh, yeah.
And let me, again, just to specify, kind of, they're films that require your full attention, for a duration over which you have no control. Right? Like, I can't imagine seeing either of those films on television. I just can't. And maybe other people are better and more disciplined than I am, but I know that I would just put the pause button on 25 times. Right? Whereas kind of there's something about you not having control over the pause button in these films. Right, of just kind of having to go with the flow of the film itself, whilst them being like so visually intricate and fascinating and expressive, that I think they're really both really truly great films.
There are points of such slowness that
I didn't find it slow.
I feel the parts lack expression.
I didn't find it slow at all, and actually I was afraid of it because went to an 8:00 screening that started at 8:30, and I'd been traveling half the day. So, and I had woken up really early in another country. So I was afraid of, how, but it had me enraptured, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe just a difference of opinion there.
Oh, sure. Isn't it always?
No, well, it's not always.
No, well, I mean, normally is. Normally my opinion is wrong, but I express it forcefully, and that counts. But in this case, I'm really just mainly happy to let things go because it's there's an element to which I think it's just not quite my cup of tea in this film. I'm not sure exactly how. I just didn't click with it. But I can appreciate absolutely everything that you liked about it. I can appreciate how you liked it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like your argument, I don't think there's a problem with it at all in terms of what you were saying. I mean, it was funny because the audience was the screening was very, very full.
It was very full.
It was a big audience. And I think the film was getting more laughs than it wanted. I felt that there were points, they got a few laughs. It wasn't uproarious, but there were points I felt where people were finding it a little silly or a little over serious. But I'm thinking particularly of the scene where Elizabeth Debicki is with the guy.
Yes.
And then Viola Davis comes in and she basically has a go at her for
sleeping with someone
like less than 2 weeks after her husband died.
Yes.
And they have a brief argument and they slap each other. And I think I didn't laugh, but some people in the audience I think felt like that was a bit EastEnders.
Yes, well, I mean, in a way, that's what the film is drawing on, is that kind of television glossy melodrama, that's very pleasurable, really. So I do suspect that maybe the audience wanted more of that,
Oh, really?
Yes, I mean, I think, because those are pleasures, really. But I think that this is why I mean, my advice to people is if you go in expecting like an art movie, you'll think how great it is. If you go in expecting like a big, glossy, big screen version of the Television Widows, you'll be disappointed.
Yeah. Well, let's assume anyone's actually seen Television Widows these days. I don't know how many people remember.
It's a long time ago, so
it's 35 years old. So I don't know how many people really would actually be familiar with it. People would probably be very surprised to find out that this is based on an ITV show.
Well, it's probably always been like on video or DVD.
I'm sure it's been available, but
So we'll see. I mean, it'll be interesting to get people's response. And that might be a good note to end
Have
on,
you seen
so.
Widows? I mean, the first one. And have you seen this? And how do they compare?
That's right.
Let
us know.
I'm gonna watch Prime Suspect.
Prime Suspect is great.
Because I've never seen that.
It's
and
great.
I know it's huge. And actually, the reason I always put off watching Prime Suspect was because I just assumed it was like a massive, long, sort of 25 episode procedural.
No,
for some reason.
It's like
it's only 2 episodes. They're big episodes. They're like an hour and a half long.
Yes.
But there are only 2 episodes per Prime Suspect.
Okay, I thought maybe some of the later ones might be a few more than 2.
Maybe.
But they're not long, right? It's not a big series. It's always like a mini series. It might.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of them might have been 4 episodes or something, but that's about it.
I'm just going to check. Why not? Because I can. No, 7 series and 15 episodes.
Okay.
So that is 2 a series plus 1.
And each episode was what, 120 minutes or 100 minutes or something like that.
100 minutes.
Okay, so there you go.
Says
So well, that sounds about right to me. So each series was about 3
minutes.
hours.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. 2 movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're very, very good.
I look forward to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, we are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Facebook and Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, and SoundCloud, and eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Right. So thank you very much for listening, and do let us know your views if
you'd
like.
There you go. Bye bye then.
Bye bye.